So, as Eric said, my name's Alex Hoffman. I am the Director of Project Finance for the Department of Housing and Community Development here in Baltimore City, and joined by my colleagues this evening to discuss capital sources of funds offered by the department for development. The funds we're going to be discussing today are geared towards developers and community organizations. They're not geared towards individual homeowners. There are a number of resources that the department offers for individual homeowners, and they're summarized on our website, but that's not the subject of this evening's meeting. So the funding that we are going to be discussing generally falls into three different buckets of projects that it could potentially fund. Affordable housing, market rate housing, and what I'm calling community centers, but that is going to capture a range of project types that are going to be sponsored typically by community organizations, nonprofit organizations. First, we're going to discuss affordable housing. I apologize, some of the joys of working from home here. So first, we're going to discuss sources that are used to finance affordable housing. Oftentimes, affordable housing, it's a term that's thrown around, but oftentimes folks are operating under different definitions. So just to kind of provide some background on affordable housing development and what we're defining as affordable housing here. Affordable housing is typically defined as housing that serves individuals that make 60% or less of the area median income. So that median income is not just Baltimore City, it is Baltimore City and the 5 surrounding counties that are indicated on this map. And the rent is typically defined as 30% of someone who makes 60% of the area median incomes of their income. That would provide the annual rent payment. So affordable housing in Baltimore, it depends on the family size. So the income limits are shown here. It can be as high as $44,000 a year income for a family of 1 individual, and for a family of 4, it could be $63,000. The rents associated with those income levels are shown below, and efficiency what's in parentheses there is the occupancy level. It's a little confusing, but for a single individual, the rent could be up to $1,100 a month. For a 2-bedroom unit, it could be $1,400 a month. So a lot of times when people describe affordable housing, it can be up to these limits, but it can also be much less. And this is also, it can include vouchers, which provide assistance for individuals. So they're paying a fixed portion of their rent rather than a fixed rent itself. Or it can be at a more standard rent amount that's just a fixed rent charge per month. A lot of affordable housing is developed using a tool called low-income housing tax credits. These tax credits are allocated, they're federal tax credits that are allocated on the state level. There's 2 different types, 9% and 4%. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I think it's just really important to understand that this is a financing tool that is frequently paired with our funding sources for affordable housing. This just provides some information on the differences between 9% low-income housing tax credits and 4% low-income housing tax credits. The 9% credits typically generate more equity because these tax credits are sold to generate equity that is part of the capital stack for the project. The 9% credits are competitive, and they are highly competitive in the state of Maryland. 4% credits are allocated on a first-come, first-served basis as long as a project meets the threshold requirements. This financing tool is really used for larger multifamily developments of affordable housing. And the programs administered by the Community Development Administration, which is part of the State Department of Housing and Community Development. So the HOME program is a federal block grant given to the city by HUD every year, and it is used in Baltimore to provide Gaap financing for projects that are pursuing the low-income housing tax credits. So it is exclusively available to projects that are developing affordable rental housing and also pursuing low-income housing tax credits. And it serves as a subordinate loan to the development. We only structure it as a loan. It's never used as a grant. And because it's federal funds, it comes with a number of what are called cross-cutting requirements. These include minority and women-owned business participation requirements. That's a city requirement and applies to all of the funding sources we're going to be discussing this evening. Particular to the federal funding source is HUD's site and neighborhood standards, Davis-Bacon, which is the federal prevailing wage requirements, Section 3, which is the federal local hiring requirements, affirmative fair housing, which is a fair housing marketing plan requirement associated with any housing that receives HUD financing, and Part 50 or 58 environmental review, which is again specific to HUD financing. The way this funding source is allocated is through a notice of funding availability process that's typically done annually ahead of the state's competitive 9% tax credit round. And the funding awards that are made are subject to HUD approval. And I'm the primary contact for that. Just some information on the HUD site neighborhood standards, which do come into play for any housing that is being developed using HUD funds. The intent of HUD site neighborhood standards is to further fair housing objectives, and it essentially stipulates what parts of the city that we can use federal funds in. And in doing that analysis, it's, I'm oversimplifying it here, but it does involve a demographic review of the area. And, the primary demographics that we're looking at are poverty rate and minority concentration. So we're looking, essentially what HUD's trying to get at here is they're trying to make sure that new affordable housing that's funded using the home program is in areas of opportunity. And they're using these demographics, which are frankly kind of crude tools, to get at where areas of opportunity are in furthering fair housing and providing affordable housing in areas that have low poverty rates and are diverse. I've included a link here, and this whole PowerPoint presentation will be made available after the presentation today. And I've included links on the PowerPoint presentation to further resources for folks to follow up. We do have a write-up of HUD site and neighborhood standards on our website that also provides links to the full source document from HUD on this. So this is a demographic maps. It shows, the one on the left shows the poverty rates. The areas in green have poverty of less than 20%, which is typically what HUD is looking for to invest in an area. And although areas of 20 to 30%, are, something that it can still be workable. And similar for the minority concentration on the right. One thing to also note is that this isn't hard and fast. There is, if a development is part of a transformational plan for an area that you can argue is going to really substantially change the demographics for an area over time, then, that is still an opportunity to use federal funds. I think a really good example of that is the current Perkins Somerset Old Town redevelopment. You were just looking at it from a demographic standpoint, absent the transformational plan for that area, it wouldn't meet the HUD site and neighborhood standards. But that's an area where we've made a convincing argument to HUD that that redevelopment plan, which includes affordable housing but is mixed income, is going to really make substantial changes in the area. So here I'm going to turn it over to John Mobley to speak about Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Mobley. I am the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Manager for the City of Baltimore. I'm going to talk to you about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the differences between that and some of the last program that was up by Alex. Thank you, Alex. So we run an Affordable Housing Trust Fund here in Baltimore City, and we get our money from two places. One is from a distribution from the city itself, and number two, the second source is from tax revenue, a small tax revenue of buildings that are sold over $1 million. So we get a little bit from each of the sale, and we that's how we get our funds. So we use this fund in order to develop housing at 50% and less of the area median income. Now we realize that affordable housing, according to HUD, is at 60% of the area median income. However, for this program, the program that I'm currently in, we help housing for people that are at and below 50% of the area median income. And we really try to get down to the 30% of the area median income folks who are at and below 30% of the area median income. We help with rentals, we help with home ownership, we help with transitional housing and community land trusts. We at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we also do both loans and grants. So you can get a loan through us, and we'll work through that with you. And you can also qualify for a grant, and in order to help fund your projects or et cetera, or housing, et cetera. There are requirements to getting the funds from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. There's a WNBA requirement. There's local hiring, prevailing wage, and it's not necessarily any pairings that happen. We put out NOFAs, notices of funding availability, in order to find applicants and projects that we can fund. You can look on the website. It's really easy to just Google Baltimore City Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and you can see the past and present NOFAs that have been put online and offered to the public. And this website will constantly be updated with new ones. My contact information is below, and that's all I have to say.
Great, thanks, John. All right, so next we're going to talk about funding sources that can be used for both affordable housing and what we're calling community centers, kind of neighborhood-based uses, nonprofit type uses. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan Moriarty from Cdbg to speak to that HUD block grant.
Thanks, Alex, and hello, everybody. The Cdbg program, Community Development Block Grant, is what that stands for. It's a HUD program, so like HOME, which Alex has talked about, it's a federal program and has federal rules and regulations to go along with it. And we use it typically to fund, it can fund a variety of things. Actually, the broadest, I would say, variety of activities regarding community development come through the Community Development Block Grant Program. Two of those areas that we're talking about tonight are the community centers. So we do fund things like community center rehab. There are at least two of them that we've been working on lately, that we've been funding them with both capital funding and also some operating funding, rehab admin type funding. And those are, I think one of them is the Franciscan Center. Another one would be it's in Sandtown. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to call it in the long run. So places like that where the neighborhoods can gather We're also funding things that are called Spruce Up Projects. Those tend to be streetscape improvement projects, can be small parklet improvements. We do fund several organizations that are doing lot cleanup, so cleaning and greening type projects. And then we also do support the larger groups that are doing multifamily housing, either rehab or development when asked to. One of those groups is Southwest Partnership, that's doing a number of, it's not clear how many, but they're doing a number of rehab units in the Southwest area. So about 7% of the CDBG funding goes to these kinds of projects. The majority of our funding goes to owner-occupied rehab services that the city provides. We also fund senior services and youth services. We fund recreation and parks. We fund code enforcement activities. So, and a plethora of other activities. So typically we make grants. On occasion, we'll make it a loan, particularly if it's a property that's going to be earning income over time, we'll make it a loan. But most often it's a grant, something like a Spruce Up project where there's not going to be any income coming into that area. Like the home projects, being a federal program, we're subject to these requirements. The minority and women business employment opportunities, site and neighborhood standards, Davis-Bacon, Section 3, affirmative housing, and the environmental reviews. We're subject to all of those. So any project that is using our funding, we are making sure that it is following the guidelines that are with those. We typically, our program is an annual program, and usually the grants are for a 12-month period. We do an annual application process, and we typically start that in October or November. We started in the office in October, and then it gets pushed out around November. We have 2 public hearings. One is in November that we tell people how they can apply, okay? And I've just gotten the signal that I should move on, but my contact information is down there, and you can also go to the Dhcd website and find information about us under plans and reports. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Susan.
Yep.
So now we're going to talk about what is in some ways our most flexible funding source in terms of the project type, the Community Catalyst grants. It can be used for affordable housing, market rate housing, or community centers, but it has a number of other restrictions that focus who the eligible applicants are. So I'm going to let Felicia speak to that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felicia Harris, and I'm the Grants and Investment Manager for Community Catalyst Grants. And just a little bit of background about the grant itself. In 2018, Dhcd established the Community Grants Program to provide operating and capital funding to support organizations in historically disinvested communities. These communities are predominantly low income, minority, and have suffered disproportionately from low housing values, high rates of vacancies, abandonment, poverty, crime, public health problems, and receive less public and private investment than any other communities. Community Catalyst grants are intended to value neighborhoods, meaning support community-based efforts that support residents as they take their leads in communities, in their communities' redevelopment plans, promote equity and community development in long disinvested neighborhoods, funding from emerging funding for emerging and established organizations in historically disinvested neighborhoods provides critical financial support to community-based initiatives that need it most, as well as Alex said, this grant is extremely flexible. Applicants may identify their priorities for funds, whether it's increasing staff, retaining consultants, updating equipment, creating cooperative enterprises, or helping to finance a project that achieves a community identified need. So we do have the operating side of the program, but today I'll focus on the capital side. The capital side focuses on helping organizations be able to have those have funding to support those community initiatives and community projects. We do also allow these dollars to provide leverage for other investors to be able to support those projects as well. And the applicants, for the requirements, applicants have to be 501c3 organizations. They have to focus on, have to have MBE, WBE requirements, local hiring, as well as prevailing wage. And yes, this is only a grant-only program. We do not have any loans within this program.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to go, I know we've been talking about a lot of the requirements that come with the funding kind of briefly, and I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on those funding requirements so folks understand you know, kind of the implications of those requirements for their overall project if they're considering applying. So first, we'll speak to the minority and women-owned business requirements. This is a city requirement that it touches every single funding project, funding type that we have discussed here this evening. The typical goals for participation within the development budget is 27% minority-owned business and 10% women-owned business participation. Those percentages are based on the development budgets, not just the construction costs, because we are talking about capital funding sources here. And the documentation for the participation is through the completion of statements of intent forms from all the qualified contractors and subcontractors that work on a project or other you know, businesses that participate. And those businesses need to be certified by the city of Baltimore. I know sometimes we run into confusion where folks have a business that's certified by MDOT, and that unfortunately, although there is a streamlined certification process for firms that have been certified by MDOT, we cannot accept that certification in lieu of the Baltimore City certification. So we do need to have firms certified in Baltimore, and they need to, in order to be eligible, meet the Small Business Administration business size for their business type and do business within the city of Baltimore, as well as the obvious ownership requirements through either minority or women-owned business. If you have additional questions about this program and the requirements, you should reach out to the Minority and Women's Business Opportunity Office, which is within the Law Department of Baltimore City. And we've included a link to that office with their contact information in the presentation that will be distributed. Next, I've included all of the federal requirements. So these are requirements that are coming from HUD and are going to be associated by the two HUD block grants we've discussed this evening, the HOME program and the Cdbg program. The requirements are Davis-Bacon, which is the federal prevailing wage requirement. You would need to determine the applicable wage rates depending on the construction type. And then the wages themselves differ depending on the particular construction trade. And then during the construction period, you would submit certified payrolls on a weekly basis for review and confirmation that the appropriate wage rates are being met during the project. Section 3 is the federal local hiring requirement. It requires that you provide training, employment, contracting, and other economic opportunities to low and very low income persons. And you need to document efforts in reports that are submitted at 25, 50, 75, and 100% of construction completion. And the final federal requirement that I'm highlighting here is the Part 50 or Part 58 environmental review process. And that's a prescribed review process to review like a phase 1 environmental assessment and a phase 2 if that's been indicated. Also determination of whether or not there are any historic resources on the site, anything of that nature. Earlier in the presentation, I discussed the HUD site and neighborhood standards. And just to clarify, those are only applicable to housing. So they're going to apply to all home projects, but from the CDBG side, they only apply to housing because they are tied to the fair housing objectives. The city requirements are similar to the federal requirements in many ways. There is both a city prevailing wage and a city local hiring program that mirror the Davis-Bacon and the Section 3 requirements. If you have a project that has both federal and city funds in it, typically the federal program takes precedent. So you wouldn't be trying to figure out, well, wait, do I have to have city prevailing wage or Davis-Bacon wages? Typically, in that instance, the Davis-Bacon wages would take precedent. The city prevailing wage applies to all city construction projects that are let by the city, mayor and city council of over $5,000. And the how it impacts projects where the city is participating as a funder is slightly different, though. It's typically only kicking in on projects where the city is the primary funder for a project. And additional information can be found through the Wage Commission. The city's local hiring requirements are through two different laws. One is Employ Baltimore, which impacts financial participation of $50,000 to $300,000, and the other is the Baltimore City local hiring, which is from $300,000 to $5 million. More information on the Mayor's Office of can be found through the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. And generally, they're going to be working with you on advertising any hiring that you're doing within certain ways, and then documenting those hiring efforts. So just provided a little summary spreadsheet in terms of which of these requirements apply to which of the different funding sources we've described here. Also included the kind of characteristics of the financing, whether it's a loan, a grant, or whether that funding source can be structured either way, depending on the specifics of the project and the project type that's funded, if it's affordable housing, a community center, or potentially market rate housing as well. So with that, I think we're going to open it up to questions. I know a bunch of questions have been coming in through the chat. So we can maybe try to take some of those and also open up the floor.
Okay, I believe Kelly is going to read the questions from the chat. Are you there, Kelly?
If she's not there, I can read them. It's Robin.
Okay. Thank you, Robin.
So the first question is, will the slides be shared after the presentation? I believe you answered that, but if you could repeat.
Yes, we will definitely share the slideshow after the presentation, and I've purposely incorporated a number of links for folks. So you can do some additional digging on these different requirements and different funding sources after tonight's presentation.
Great.
There's a follow-up question about where those slides are going to be posted. You might want to just cover that one now too.
If I can just intervene, we have a DHCD YouTube page and the entire recording will be uploaded probably live tomorrow afternoon.
With the slides as well?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next question. Do you offer any type of funding for individuals who rehab a Baltimore City property? And do you help investors find potential buyers?
Teresa, do you want to take that?
I guess
Yes,
Susan, I can take a stab at it too. If this is a house that you're going to own or occupy, so you're going to live in this house, there are funds depending upon your income that are available through the Office of Rehab Services. But if you're redeveloping it to sell it, that's a different story.
I believe she's currently rehabbing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what's
For investment.
For investment. Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So not through the Office of Rehab Services. I'm not aware, but I think we do have some services. Maybe somebody else can take over.
I'm not familiar with incentives that we have to assist with rehabbing properties at this time.
Okay. So I would say, one source might, I don't know if the Baltimore Development Corporation has funding or not, but that would be worth checking into.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
CCG is able to rehab houses. Funding is able to rehab houses. However, the stickler is no CCG funds can be, if the property is owned by Baltimore City, we cannot acquire the property. We can help stabilize it, but we cannot acquire the property with CCG funds.
Great. Next question. Does DHCD provide consultations to review a project for funding that the project may be eligible for?
So this, I think, is a question looking for guidance prior to application. And I know on the home side, we're certainly happy to, look at a project before application to see if we think it's a good fit for the home program. I think, a lot of this is folks trying to find the right funding source for their project. And it's really why we wanted to have this presentation this evening. I don't know if other funding sources want to speak to what guidance they can offer prior to an application. I think the other thing is, a lot of times on our website, we keep the old notice of funding availabilities posted. And it's really worthwhile taking a look at those before there's a live funding round. So you understand, what an application is going to entail, what documentation you're going to have to start pulling together. You could also typically see the projects that were funded in the past, and that can give you, I think, also another data point in terms of, whether or not your project is going to be a fit for a particular funding source.
Next question. What is a non-residential community center for CDBG purposes?
So that would be, so there's a number of different ways to describe it. One would be, so the Franciscan Center that's being rehabbed is owned by a nonprofit organization, and they provide a lot of assistance to homeless people. So they have a kitchen, they have a food pantry, they have a clothing closet, they have resources for those folks. And they needed new flooring and that kind of thing. So that would be one example. Another example would be something like what the Recreation and Parks Department has. So I think that there's I'm not going to be able to come up with the name of it right now. Cherry Hill, I think maybe. There's a community center being built that will include public facilities that are available to the public at large. Okay, so it's not, it's not housing, it's not a private commercial building, but it's a public building. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, St. Francis Neighborhood Center in
There we
Reservoir
go.
Hill is another example.
Thanks.
Yeah, and Cherry Hill Town Center is owned by Catholic Charities and provides both social services and frankly retail amenities in an underserved portion of the city, and is owned by a nonprofit.
I think Baybrook also gets CDBG funds for community centers.
Okay. Is youth agricultural / recreational nonprofit services also included in the grants?
I think we missed one, but the answer to that is a nonprofit organization definitely can apply for CDBG funding and perhaps also for CCG funding. We have a number of groups that are doing like urban farming, and then they're also doing an employment and training element of that with youth. And then we also have several groups that do like after school or summertime programs for youth. So definitely, now I will say that youth, we are trying very hard to push them more towards the Children and Youth Fund, because there's a lot of money that's there specifically for youth. And the more, the less we fund youth, the more we can fund seniors and housing and some of the other needs that don't have dedicated dollars. So I would encourage somebody that's looking for money for a youth program to go to the Children and Youth Fund.
Susan, can you answer the question right before that?
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
can you understand that question? Because
Not
I was
exactly.
going to go back to it.
But so we do have an annual action plan that is out for public review right now. It is for the year that started July 1st of this year. I'm not sure what is meant by are those who the intended grantees are this year.
Right.
But a person can go onto the DHCD website, look under the plans and report section, plans and reports. I think right now, I think it's the second set of hyperlinks, but there is a summary of activities. And in there, that's basically a list of who will be receiving funding. We are behind on that. I would say the contracts will be coming out. I would not expect contracts to come out before September at this point. And it might be a little bit later than that, depending upon how things go with the contracts that we're currently trying to get out. So, the money's, this is aggravated by the COVID, but in general, no funding from the federal government is fast money. It always takes a while to get everything figured out. But the place to look for, if you think that maybe you got funded or you're wondering who has been funded in the past, the DHCD website, DHCD, I think it's .gov, right?
DHCD.baltimorecity.gov.
Okay, yeah. And under plans and reports, you'll find several years worth of reports, action plans, the summaries, and other information about the CDBG program.
So Melanie Thomas asked the question and then raised her hand. Melanie, do you have some clarifying comments regarding your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for answering the question. And the reason why was because I'm with the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, and we had applied for the CDBG funds and just received that annual report notice, but no other information as to whether or not we were a recipient. We did see our name on the list, so I just wanted to confirm what that meant.
Yeah, so if,
This was our
so,
first time applying.
right, so if you've seen your name in there, there probably is a dollar amount next to it. So that means that that's what we're proposing to do. And yes, the South Baltimore Community Land Trust did receive an award this year. The awards, the process is, that's the annual action plan. It has to be completed, uploaded into HUD system, sent off to HUD. They have, I think, 45 days to review it, although they usually turn it around much quicker than that. And once we're confident that they're going to approve it, then we'll be getting those award letters out. So we hope to get those award letters out. It's going in, I think within a couple of weeks here. I'm thinking we want to have it in by the 9th. Yeah, next Monday. That's our goal. And so then the award letters, I would expect to come out in early September. And Melanie, if you want to give me a call tomorrow or shoot me an email, I can give you more elaboration on your particular award.
Thank you very much. I'll appreciate that. I'll email you now.
Okay.
Okay. Next question. What is the status of the 2021 Community Catalyst grants? We are a grantee and have heard nothing.
Hello, I can answer that question. So as it stands right now, we are still discussing the details for orientation. We were just awarded those grants on July 6th. So we're still discussing the orientation details because we definitely wanted those to be different from what we've done in the past. And once we have finalized those details, we'll be reaching out to all grantees.
Okay, thank you. What is MBE WBE? And the answer is Minority and Women's Business Enterprise. Can you post the email for MBE WBE department?
I think it's in the
I think
slide deck.
Yes, yeah, the link for their website is included in their the slide deck. And they're housed under the law department in Baltimore City.
Yeah, so you
Thank
should be
you.
able to find them pretty easily if you just go to, Baltimore City and then look for the law department and you'll find them under there. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there grants for investors who buy, rehab, and sell homes for market value?
Not through the city.
I already answered that thing.
Yeah, there
would-
is, I mean, not really developers. There, if you qualified as an applicant for CCG, theoretically that could be for market development and not affordable housing. But generally, our funding sources for housing development are geared towards affordable housing.
Yeah. I think that if it were me, I would have a discussion though with someone over at the Baltimore Development Corporation. Because I do think that they have some resources. I'm not sure if it's funding, but they may know of funding sources also for market value housing.
Mhm.
I would also suggest Baltimore Community Lending as well.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know
What
if
about-
Live Baltimore has anything. Does anybody know that?
No.
Yeah, okay.
I would say the same would go for the next question. What about financing for small developers developing 1 to 3 units?
Yeah, again, it depends
Baltimore-
upon, if you're talking about for market rate, we probably can't help you a lot. If you're talking about developing for affordable housing, then we might be able to help you out, especially if you're a nonprofit organization.
Right. But again, as Eric said, Baltimore Community Lending might help them
Yes,
as
right.
well.
And
for
Teresa,
market rate.
Teresa, I believe we have on our YouTube channel the workshop from Baltimore Community Lending. Is it still up?
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
So if you go to our YouTube channel for DHCD, The last workshop we had was from Baltimore Community Lending. If you didn't participate in that workshop, it would be good to look at that to see what Baltimore Community Lending can do to help with financing.
Mhm. Thank you. Can I ask that Deborah Grant clarify her question? She's still on the line. I can try to read it. Who do we contact to get guidance based on that person's scenario, since each may be different? I'm not sure what she's referring to. She on the line?
You need to unmute yourself, perhaps.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I was speaking in reference to if you have a specific scenario. I'm sure like a lot of the investor scenarios might be different. So I was trying to find out if there was consultation that you would be able to provide to folks like myself that are interested in investment in Baltimore City for the lower income communities and how to get started. So that was really my question. Just to kind of find out what type of financial resources that might be available for investors for low-income housing. Investors, I should say. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd start with John, right? The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and see what he has available.
Yeah, I think likely a first-time affordable housing developer is not going to be a fit for the home program. So Affordable Housing Trust Fund, I think, would be a good place to start.
Yeah, and maybe the CCG, since it sounds like it's an emerging interest.
On your,
Thank you.
can I ask my question?
Yeah.
Okay, it sounds like for most of your financing is for big projects, correct? Because we own several properties in Oliver, and Baltimore Community Lending and all the lenders are telling us unless you're able to do the majority of the block, they're not interested because they feel that doing 1 or 2 units is not going to turn around the block. Is that the same for your program?
So
Not for
Not
CCG.
Mars.
So for CCG, we cannot support projects that's over $4 million. So we are focused on smaller development.
So you don't have the requirement that if there's a number of vacant units on the block, you have to do a majority to turn around the whole block.
No.
That also goes for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We can do smaller projects. Our CAP funding currently is at $750,000. That is subject to change, but it can be, I mean, if we're developing housing for people to benefit people at and below 50% of the area median income, there's no restriction that it has to be for developing an entire block. It could be for single units or et cetera.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that said, though, we certainly, as a department, like to see whole block outcomes.
Sure.
And
Yes.
if a proposal included some vacants on a block, but there were other vacants that weren't being addressed, I do think that would raise questions of, how are we going to ensure that, these properties that are being renovated are going to be able to be stable if they're adjacent to a vacant home. So I think if you're looking at a block and interested and you have some of the vacants, but not all of them, it may be worth also reaching out to our land transactions section to see if it's something that we could potentially, help take on to acquire and consolidate.
Mm-hmm. The CDBG program does do, it's possible that we can help you. We have done several houses, both with capital funding and with rehab admin. So we support groups like Habitat for Humanity. We support groups like Rebuild Metro that are doing, smaller numbers of units that may or may not be connected to each other. So it really just kind of depends upon the individual situation, and how much match you have plays into that kind of thing too. We typically don't have the wherewithal to support an entire rehab project, but we may be able to contribute some gap financing.
Yeah, I think, Susan, you bring up a great point. One other thing that if folks are looking at notice of funding availabilities that were issued previously, you'll notice that we do ask for documentation of other funding sources.
Mhm.
And, like so much else, we like to see our funding sources leveraged against other sources. So if you're looking, at putting together an application, really think about what other sources could be part of your capital stack, whether it's a private first mortgage, you're working with a group like Baltimore Community Lending that we've discussed, that did a similar presentation last week. We really like to see how we can leverage the city sources against other sources to achieve an outcome.
There's a question sort of in the middle of these that we've been kind of going around, from Darren Johnson Jr. These are specifically, he's talking about the CCG, but he's asking about reaching out and partnering, I think, with a nonprofit to renovate and create affordable housing. We see that sometimes. Typically,
I think that was a question from me. So for the CCG funds, you are able to partner with different nonprofits, but once you partner with that nonprofit, you guys have to provide documentation for both organizations. We actually have bonus points built into the application for established groups to work with some of the emerging groups to get that to build those neighborhood projects and receive funding based upon that as well, just to help with those residents and those citizens in that neighborhood to establish that project.
Yeah, and for the CDBG funding, it really would need to be the nonprofit that has the controlling interest. So, if there's a neighborhood organization in your area, and you've got a unit that you want to, I would reach out to them and see if they have any interest in participating. If you want to call us, there are several groups that we work with pretty consistently, such as Habitat for Humanity and Rebuild Metro, are two of them that might be interested in partnering with someone too. So.
Okay, well, my question is, we had all of that proposal. Is there any way that we can find out why our application was turned down? We had a community park, we had leverage funding, and you just say the answer is just no. Do you ever state, well, the reason why you turned down their application?
Which program were you turned down for?
Affordable Housing Trust.
Oh, that would be for me. So as far as the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, yeah, absolutely. We try to set up 30-minute debriefing sessions with anybody who requests it. We've reached out to, I think, almost everyone for a request if they wanted a 30-minute debriefing session. And in past rounds, we connected with every single applicant, regardless of whether they were selected in that round or not. And we give reasons as to, at least background that we can about, what we saw in the application, et cetera. And, and comparatively, like about the round in which the application applied in. If you have you gotten a request for a 30-minute debriefing?
Oh, we've sent tons of emails asking for information, but maybe not sending it to the right person. So can you put your email in the chat?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can do that. Absolutely. Is that it?
Well,
Okay.
everything you're saying, we thought we did.
Okay,
Okay, so should we go
um,
to the next? Alex, I'm gonna be picking up for Robin.
okay.
So the next question is from Darren Johnson, and he asks, is there a list of nonprofits that receive CCG funds to disperse?
Yes, there are. All of the recipients of the CCG funds are listed on the Dhcd Baltimore City's website under the Community Catalyst Grants tab.
Great, thanks, Felicia. Next is Shannon Hawthorne asks, could you give a little more information about the youth funding and where you could find information on that fund? for a
Yeah.
youth
I
uh,
dropped the link in the chat.
Great.
Great, thank you. I think we skipped one though, up above, Christopher.
He was just saying he can help. It seems like an ad. It wasn't a question.
Yeah, but I think that's an important one because people are asking about help. So those of you that are looking for funding options, you might want to talk to that person.
And I do just want to give a disclaimer that DHCD is not endorsing
Sure.
supporting.
Yes.
Please vet any funder that you meet with before you sign on the dotted line.
Yeah, right. This is just simply networking, no endorsements.
Okay, next question is, all right. Is anyone here?
Term City buyers. I don't know who those even are.
When do you expect to finalize the CCG grant details?
At this current moment, we do not have a date.
We have another question about someone looking for grants and funding for a single row home. So what do you have recommendation? I would definitely recommend checking out the Baltimore Community Lending seminar we did last week.
Baltimore
I think
Community
that would be-
Lending says they will not lend on one project. You have to have the majority of the block.
But they did have, they were saying how there were opportunities that you could partner with other folks who did have, so that you could each split the money. I felt like they still offered options for things you could do to still be able to seek funding.
I would suggest you reach out. I don't know if the information you got was just from their webinar or.
No, we actually had a private Zoom meeting.
Mhm.
And they said on our particular block, unless we had majority control of the property, they don't like to go into areas unless they can feel they can significantly turn around the whole block. We had a Zoom meeting.
So, there could be a lot of variables in that scenario. One of the challenges is if it's a block with a significant number of vacants, lenders would be concerned if you're rehabbing houses that may be attached to other vacant properties, because though you may rehab them, if they're attached to a vacant property, it's very difficult to get insurance on those properties.
I understand that. We had properties where we had the whole attached, but they were attached, and we were going to do the rehab of the attached. But they said you had to have the majority of the vacant houses on the whole block. Yeah, I'm aware of that requirement about the vacant units next door. We had control of that. Okay. We got together several owners.
So feel free to email me, ericp.lee@baltimorecity.gov. I'll put it in the chat, and I'd like to find out a little more about that and see if I can.
We need your help. We're finding all these roadblocks. You're looking at a city that needs investors, and you make it seem like only big nonprofits. you put your email in the chat.
I'm doing it now.
The next question is from Kimberly Arnold, and she asks, well, she first asks, are churches eligible for these grants? And then she also asked if she would be allowed to unmute herself to ask a couple of other questions.
So I would say for the CDBG program, churches themselves are not eligible, but if they are looking to provide services that are not related to the church, so, you know, a food kitchen, a food pantry, clothing closet, something like that, the CDBG funding definitely can fund activities that are being provided by faith-based groups.
Just to tag along to that question, another person also asked, are grants only for companies? Are anything for single seasoned elders? I don't know if that's like seniors or just single individuals who are looking for grant money toward programs. Does it have to be a company?
Yeah, so something I said at the beginning of the presentation is that this is all geared towards capital funding for developers, community organizations that are undertaking larger scale development. The department does have a number of programs for individual homeowners, some of which are actually particularly geared towards seniors and aging in place. But that's not this presentation. We do have resources on our website, though, that are geared towards individual residents and homeowners. And so I would encourage that individual to go to our website and look at the homeowner section.
Yeah, there are a couple of programs that are run out of the Office of Homeownership. That would be the Office of Rehab Services. And so they have emergency roofs, and they have what they call deferred loans. So those are, again, for owner occupants of structures. It's not for investors, it's for landlords.
And there's also the HUBS program, which is
True. Yes.
administered through Civic Works.
Right.
And HUB stands for Housing Upgrades and Benefit Seniors.
Yep. Right. Yeah.
So I think those are all the questions that have been asked. Unless anyone would like to, I don't know if we're allowing people to unmute themselves.
Yeah, I think it's fine if folks want to unmute themselves.
I have a question if somebody's able to answer. Mowbray, I have taken it upon myself to buy several rehabable properties on the west side of Baltimore to try to give back. I'm doing a number of projects where there are a lot of vacant properties on the blocks that I've been trying to develop individual houses. And my question is, I come from a long tenure of working in Washington, D.C. in emerging neighborhoods, and they had a very good program where people who own vacant properties who are doing nothing with them, and I'm sure the city owns the bulk of them anyway, but I mean, if there are a lot of vacant properties whereby the owners just consider them money in the bank, where they paid $5,000 for a house a couple of years ago, and they're basically just sitting on these vacant properties, which get broken into all the time by the riffraffs and people. Is there a way to increase the tax rates on vacant properties to force these people to either sell or get a building permit and develop the houses themselves? It was a very good program in Washington, D.C., where taxes on vacant properties, well, first of all, they made them render them sanitary, where they were totally boarded up, no leaks. There were 5 parts of being rendering a property sanitary, where you boarded properly, no way to get in. There were no holes in any floors. There were no holes in any roofs. It was rat baited and rendered sanitary. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is, if they continue to own without developing or selling, then they, for a period of time, they could increase, the government increased the tax base on those properties, which basically taxes them out of holding at a lower tax. So is there a program like that that might be a good program for Baltimore?
That sounds like a great program. I'm not aware that we have a program like that. I think that would be something to maybe talk about with your council members.
Yeah,
See if you could interest one of them in pushing forward something along those lines.
Yeah, there's nothing with that kind of tax component, but if there is a block that a developer has acquired a number of properties on, and there are a couple of vacants that they're not able to privately acquire, there are some tools that we have through, code enforcement and receivership to help the developer acquire those couple outstanding properties. I don't know if one of the neighborhood.
Well, I'm
And that's
specifically,
for,
excuse me.
well, no, I'm sorry. I was going to say, Alex is right. Receivership is generally the
Yeah.
tool that we use for privately held vacants that have been abandoned and the owner has been non-responsive in terms of maintaining the property. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that process has been extended out for a couple of years through the court system because the court's closed. But that is a tool that we use. And I want to clarify one other thing that you mentioned. There's approximately 16,000 vacant properties in Baltimore City, of which the city owns about 1,300 of them.
Yeah.
And so one of the challenges we have is that we don't own. It would almost be easier for development to take place if we own the majority of the properties, but because they are privately owned, we have to go through the legal channels of acquiring those properties, and it just takes an extraordinary amount of time and resources to do that.
Well, I don't know if you all go back as far as Robert Embry or Dave Embry, one of the Embry brothers, who basically the Audubon was totally condemned by the city and then sold off for dollar houses to individuals that would agree to stay there 5 years and that did not come from the city. They were trying to promote people to move into the city just like today. And I don't know whatever happened to that program.
Well, actually a majority of the vacants that the city currently owns are from the Dollar House program because people never rehabbed them. And then the city had to take them back over. So they're vacants that continue to be vacant. And that's why the program was terminated.
I see. So, but it was that like the Audubon, it was an entire square of houses or block of houses. It doesn't seem like to me there's very many vacant houses in the Audubon.
That's true. Neighborhoods change. We have gone through a lot of ebbs and flows throughout our time here. So,
well, I would be happy to take all the vacant houses that Baltimore has for $1 each, and I'll fix them up.
Are there other questions?
Yes. Hi. Thank you all again for this presentation. My name is Dr. Kimberly Arnold, and I'm the president of the board of directors for the Pleasant Hope Community Development Corporation. So we are a 501c3 organization, and we serve as the official nonprofit arm of Pleasant Hope Baptist Church, which is located in the Govans community. So we recently received a bond bill from the state of Maryland for $125,000 to rehab a house that the church owns for a young adult residential fellowship program. And so we have several arms, I guess you could call it, of our organization in which we provide services to the community as well as to other communities throughout Maryland and in other states. So we are connected to the Black Church Food Security Network, which focuses on food justice and addressing food insecurity in Baltimore and other communities. And then for our Community Development Corporation, we're focused on youth and young adult development, as well as community health. And then we also have a Freedom School for children that typically before COVID was providing childcare and education services for students in Baltimore City when the schools were closed. And right now we're expanding that program because we received funding from Johns Hopkins to expand that program. So I think that grant was for like $300,000. So at this point, we're trying to get additional funding for the housing renovation projects. And we need to demonstrate a match to the state in I think it's by June 1st or July 1st of next year. And so we were looking for other sources of funding at the local level because we haven't yet received or applied for any grants through Baltimore City. So from listening to the presentation tonight, it sounds like the Community Catalyst Grant and the Community Black Grant Program might be the best options. But I'm wondering if we're eligible for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, because the young adult fellows would be either college students who are attending local universities, and we do have partnerships with Morgan State, Loyola, and those like universities and colleges that are close to where our church is located. And so the students would either be like a senior in college or a graduate student, and then they would be matched with one of our community service programs, such as the Black Church Food Security Network or the Rita's Cross Freedom School, or to work within our CDC on specific service projects that would be related to improving the health and well-being of the Baltimore City community. So would we be eligible for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? And then also, would we be eligible for the Community Black Grant Program and the Community Catalyst Grant?
So, okay. So kind of actually, it seems like just based off of the broad definition that you were giving, there could be some overlap with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund program. And because those people, in this case, like, recent students or current students, they're below the area median income. So, I mean, it's at least worth a consideration in order to do it, especially depending on, provided that you're trying to provide housing. Now, the different line items and NOFAs that we have out, that's going to depend on, I guess, some internal discussions about what line item of funding we're going to be looking for applicants for. But I mean, at least income-wise, it would be worth taking a look for. But I mean, I guess you kind of got to stay up on what we're trying to fund at that particular time, what the priority is for funding for notices of funding availability. But at least in broad strokes, yeah, it would seem interesting that you wouldn't be disqualified just off of bat, for sure.
For the CDBG, I would say probably. We would probably be eligible. Again, we'd have to look at the application. The tricky part is going to be the timing. If you need it in June of next year, the round will not start until July. And so, and we're not caught up yet. So I just really can't say how things are going to go when we get to October. My contact information, Susan Moriarty, is at the top of the chat box, I think. If you want to grab that, send me your contact information and, we can discuss it further, and I can put you on our mailing list so that you would at least get the announcement when the round starts.
Okay, and we have one more question so far in the chat, and it's a good one, I think. Is there a typical percentage of the development project cost that new investors and funding seekers should anticipate having themselves before seeking money via grants or other funding programs?
So I think it's going to really depend from program to program. I know for home funds, we're typically looking for projects that, except for the home funds and pending the allocation of the tax credits that's included in the underwriting, otherwise have all their funding sources in hand. So really the only question outstanding is at the time of consideration for home funds is whether or not the 9% tax credits are going to be allocated to the project. I think for the other funding sources, they're probably a bit more flexible, but in general, the more of your sources you have in hand, the only remaining gap is the request that's before the city, regardless of funding source, I think the stronger your application is going to be. So you want to have as much of that other funding lined up ahead of time as you can. That may be a private first mortgage. It may be a first mortgage from a nonprofit lender. It could be funding from a grant from a foundation, something like that. But to the extent you can have those sources lined up going into the application for department funding sources, and then that application, the request is truly just that remaining gap, that's going to position you most strongly.
Is there a maximum amount of gap funding the home program provides?
Yes. So typically in the home program, we do not fund more than $1 million per project. One caveat to that is, with the advent of the twinning structure, where you co-locate a 9% and a 4% low-income housing tax credit project on the same site, we have been funding up to $1 million on each one of those transactions. So that can result in $2 million of home funding in what can more broadly be viewed as a single project, but really from a transactional standpoint is two different projects. And not to speak out of turn here, but on the trust fund side, they typically have a maximum funding award, or have in the past, of $750,000. So slightly lower than what can be achieved on the home side.
Great, thanks, Alex.
Yeah, and for CDBG, we don't have a hard and fast maximum, but unless the largest one that we've got out right now in terms of capital funding is, I think right around $800,000, and it's again for one of these big centers. So we're a small potato in the whole bucket of funding sources.
Hi, this is Randy Williams. I actually have I have an affordable home projects, new development utilizing shipping containers, and all the materials have been sourced. But it seems as though, just based on from listening from all of your comments, I don't have a partnering organization as far as the 501c3. Would it be best for all of the applications to partner with a 501c3 as far as offering the funding resources? Because the catalyst approach to my business is to offer a rent to own program, but I don't want to do that if there is, I guess, a better strategy approach to receive the funding, so that way we can move away from funding just based on the financial projections we currently have.
So for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, there's no requirement to have in every case, like a partnering organization that's a nonprofit. There are certain NOFAs that require it. So for example, a community land trust NOFA that was put out, that had in the past has had a requirement for a nonprofit organization listed as a community land, recognized community land trust in the state of For our rentals, they're not necessarily that same requirement where there is a 501c3. And going forward, that's not necessarily going to be the case about having to partner with a nonprofit organization. So I think it's going to kind of depend on the application or notice that you would be applying to. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. No, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank
But
you.
it can only help. It would help. It would help you to be able to apply for more if you did. Depending on.
Right. And that's what we're actually trying to figure out. Do we partner? It's for, do we partner with a 501c3 so that we can pretty much reiterate the use for funding, for home ownership and the rent to home programs that are coming out. So that way all of the resources are presented at the front instead of, after construction or things of that sort. I want to make sure I present all of the opportunities for home buyers possible.
I think that you should just, I guess, be like, when you're deciding which like line item to go for, and then make that determination based off of the needs of that funding source. So like I said, there's different line items in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Depending on which line item, then you can maybe choose if you're going to partner or not.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, I'll just ask, Eric, do you want to?
No, this is one last, we're going to take the one last question because we've used all of our time. We have 4 minutes left. So Darren's question will be the last one, Kelly.
Okay, so the question was, are there programs for individual investors for a single residential property to create affordable or veteran housing?
I think we've spoken to this some, but if it's just in one unit that's being developed at a time, right now, I guess theoretically you could apply for Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but generally that's going to be for development that may have a couple more units. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of resources right now to offer developers of one unit at a time. But it's certainly, if it's targeted to be affordable housing, you could pursue Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Yep, Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Send us your project. We'd love to hear it. Obviously, we want to develop as much as we can, but we would. It falls within the, depending on the line item, it falls within our purview, especially for, as long as it meets the income requirement. So, affordable housing, yeah, give us a look.
And I saw one question about the application cycles for the each one of the programs, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, Cdbg, and Community Catalyst Grant. Can people go? Do you want to answer that real quick, or can people go to the website and find out the application cycle?
Yeah, I think it's best for us just to answer that quickly. On the home side, we time our notice of funding availability to precede the state's 9% low-income housing tax credit round every year. The timing for this year's round has not been announced yet. We do expect it to be in early 2022, and our NOFA would be slightly ahead of that. So, the state would have the benefit of who the city is awarding home funds to going into that funding round. John, do you want to speak to the trust fund and the process you guys have for community land trusts as well as renovation and construction of affordable housing?
Sure. So ours has been at the discretion of our management. We're trying to get a more regular pattern, but we would like to get it maybe around quarterly, but we just haven't made it that far yet. Ours is such a new program as far as like sending funds out to the community.
And Felicia, the Community Catalyst Grant, the application cycle.
So we just wrapped up one of our cycles on July 6th.
Like church, a lot of people just not.
I'm sorry?
I just muted him.
Okay. So we just wrapped up one of our round 2 on July 6th. Our next round will be starting this fall with operating because we are splitting the applications. So operating will be starting, the next round will be this fall. And then for the capital round will be next January or February.
And as I put in the chat for CDBG, we start in October, trying to push out the notice. Usually our first public hearing, and that's information about how to apply. And the opening of the application is in November. If you'd like to get on the mailing list for that, my contact information is at the top of the chat box. And if you send me an email with the subject heading, please add to the master mailing list, I'll get you into it.
Great. Well, everyone, it's 7:01. I want to thank the panel. It was a great panel. Appreciate all the wonderful information. I want to thank all the participants. This was a very good webinar on our funding sources. Please reach out to us. We're here to help, and we wish everyone a wonderful evening. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good to see you, Stephen.